So he settled down and fell back asleep. While he was asleep, they put a couple other restraints on him just to hold him down real tight. I finally went out and went to the bathroom. I had to go so bad. When I finally came back, the neck surgeon was on his way over to come pick him up for surgery, and they were getting him prepped. He was running really high blood pressure, and he had a temperature of 106. And she said that was pretty normal, and I kept thinking, I said, is it like 104, like major and, not a good temperature, and here he is 106, and she says, well, we're watching him, we're keeping him drugged for it, she says, but yeah, there's always risks, but she says, we're doing the best we can to bring it down slowly, we can't just, give him something to make it come down real hard. She says that we, number one, don't have anything like that. She says, but she says he's been through a lot. It's his body's way of trying to cope with what's happened. So they started to wheel him out, and they had us walk with him. And we got into this other hallway, and the doctor met us there, and real great guy, and he explained to us that the C1, C2, and C6 were broken. He says C6, he says, isn't just broken. He says he's powdered it. He says there's not a whole lot left of that one. He says, I'm going to fuse C1 and C2 together. He says, I'm going to put them back together, and they're going to get fused together. And he says, and he explained that he's going to put like this little cage on where C6 was, and put as much of the vertebrae back into it as he could get, and over time the bone would regrow over the top of that cage, and he says he would be bolting that vertebrae to the two that were around it just to stabilize it. He says there would still be a little bit of movement, but it wasn't being fused together like the top two. And he says we'll just have to see when we get in there the extent of the major damage. He says, of course, x-rays can only do so much. And again, we got shuffled out. Oh, gosh. To the waiting room. And we waited and waited and waited. In a couple hours, the doctor came out, and he says, well, he's extremely lucky. He says, it turns out he was born with an abnormality that saved his life. And we said, oh, and he explained to us, he says, the way all the bones broke towards one direction. He says they just nearly missed the major artery going up on that side. He says the artery is abnormally small. And he says if it had been a normal average size, he says the bone would have gone right into it, and he would have bled out in seconds and died. But the bones instead had just shot right past it. And it just missed. I mean, it nicked a few other things in there, but nothing, that wasn't easily fixed. He said he's very, very lucky. So he said he's going to be fine as far as I'm concerned. He says, and he explained to me that, over time they may break down and he may have to have another surgery. He says, it may not, he says, but, this just is what it is. And I thanked him, and we got to go back to ICU and see him again, and by that point he was tired, and I went home again, and the next day I got there bright and early. I was by myself, and they were going to do his arm surgery, and here it is now, Tuesday, and they pushed his arm surgery off a whole nother day because his temperature was still super high and his arm still was really, really swollen. They were going to wait till probably Wednesday afternoon at this point. He was starting to rally a little more. They felt more comfortable with saying, yeah, he was probably going to be fine. He still had a really, really high fever. They kept him, covered in ice for the most part. And I remember asking the nurse for a bucket and some water and stuff like that, because I'm still looking at him and this blood is just dried to him, and now he's got all this iodine and everything else all over him, and kept thinking that's got to be uncomfortable and miserable for what he's already got going. So I cleaned him up the best I could with just a rag and some water, and she did give me a little bit of soap and some lotion, and he just seemed to relax. I'm sure that had to feel good. Having dried blood on your skin and everything just had to be really uncomfortable. And then, he just was grimy just from everything. And he was sweating so bad because of the fever. I'm sure a nice cool bath felt wonderful. They had to kick me out of the room to insert a thermometer that would stay in for a while to help monitor his temperature, and 24 hours, because I didn't want to see that. They were violating him in ways that no wife should have to see her husband violated. He was a little more awake. I was able to talk to him and still had the tube and everything, and she said they were probably going to take the tube out the next day after his arm surgery, because it just, is more convenient to have it in there, and when he's in surgery, because they knock him out. Oh, gosh. I'm still tired. I was up dealing with these videos all night. But it was looking better. His Baca friend came by with the president of the club, and they were talking to him and stuff, and he had another one of those episodes where he just woke up and got kind of violent and thrashing around and stuff like that, and it was rough, and I could see in their eyes that, they were going, wow, and they were right there to kind of help hold him down, and I, again, just kind of stood there crying, going, he's going to end up killing himself. The next day, the same thing. I kept thinking, this is going to last for weeks and weeks, and the president of the club didn't come back the next day, but Rev, which is what the other guy's name was, he says, yeah, I'm going to keep everybody up to date, and he says, do you want to start letting in visitors stuff? I said, well, let me give it another day, and maybe like Thursday or Friday. He says, you start letting people in, especially Friday, and Thursday I came in, they had taken the tube out, his arm was fixed, he had had the surgery for his arm, and everybody felt really good about where he was at. He was able to talk, but he was not able to really swallow because he had that surgery, and he had that tube down his throat and everything else. And he kept begging me for water, and I told him, I said, all I can do is give you these stupid little wet sponges on a stick, and keep your mouth wet. He hated that. He got really mean about that, and I know the frustration that had to be, but it couldn't be helped. So we went through the day, and I stayed there with him, and I had a baby shower planned for that weekend, and I was talking to my friend, and she was asking how he was doing. She was helping me put on the shower, and she says, are we still doing the shower, or do you want me to call through the list and tell everybody, we're postponing it or canceling it, or what do you want done? And I said, let me think about it. I said, because that means I have to be away from him, and I don't really want to be away from him right now. And I got off the phone with her, and he turned and looked at me, and he says, I want you to still do it. He says, you've been down here every day. He says, you need to go do something for you. And you need to, have something happy. He says, go have fun with your friends. He says, I'm going to be okay. He says, I'm not going to let this beat me. And I told him, I said, we got 2 little girls at home that are terrified that they're going to lose their daddy still. And he knew he wasn't totally out of the doghouse yet, but, with each day, his chances of surviving went up. So, I went through the weekend. I went back on Sunday, after I went to church, and I had him prayed for. They pulled me up and in front of the church, and they laid hands on me to pray for me when I went back to go see him. Because Friday and Saturday, and then of course Sunday morning, I was gone. I knew the girls needed to see me, because having me gone the whole time too was, rough on them. I went back up on Sunday, and I was praying the whole way up. I said, God, it would be so awesome if when I got there, they were getting him up and he was able to start eating and things like that. And I said, that to me would show he's really making progress. But deep down I knew, just when I left him, he still was in such bad shape. There was no way. His ankles were so swollen and bruised, we figured they were still broken. They said they never did try to do a scan or anything on him to see if they were broken. But they were pretty confident. They didn't think they were, but, they didn't do a lot of things at the hospital they should have. Like, they didn't give him a tetanus shot. I'm going, the man skid across the guardrail, and they didn't give him a tetanus shot. But anyway, I prayed on my way in, and I walked through those doors, and he was sitting up in bed, very active, very alert. They were giving him some food. He was finally getting to eat. He had breakfast, and he was sitting there eating his lunch. He's having to work really hard because he's now having to do things with his left hand, which is hard. And the stuff he got was stuff that was a little harder for him to eat, just one-handed. So I helped him and given him stuff he needed, and it just was this big thing. And then the nurse came in. She says, you've got physical therapy coming in like 2 hours. They want to get you up and, see how far we can walk you. And I just kept thinking, thank you, Lord. This shows huge progress. The fact that they feel he's good enough to get up and start moving around. The fact he's sitting here, he's eating, he can talk to me. He can finally get the drink of water he wants.